I recently added a mini mixed media page to my homemade journal from collage papers and magazine cutouts, and I used part of a church bulletin as a focal point eventually. I used some Caran d'Ache crayons, watercolor, and a little bit of acrylic paint for color and shapes, and also pencil and ink to scribble some lines and write some words out eventually. To start, I used matte medium to adhere the papers, including pages from my thrift store Bible and hymnal. And most of these initial pieces will be pushed right into the background and barely visible when I'm done. But I have to remind myself of that because I sometimes have my favorite pieces that I want to put down first and forget that they're going to be totally covered possibly by the time I'm done. Once the first layer's in place, I coat it with clear gesso because some of the other mediums I plan to use won't attach well to the gel medium I use to glue them down. Gesso can be used as a glue, but it's much more prone to warping. I love mixed media because it's so forgiving. If I don't like the way something looks, I can simply cover it over with something else. That's why it takes a while for me to finish a project too. I don't really have a goal in mind when I start, and if I do, the process usually takes me in a different direction anyway. I have a bin that's full of scraps of interesting papers for potential projects, and I went through it looking for colors that would hopefully harmonize with each other, and also looked for a variety of subjects and textures to kind of mix it up. Once I glued down these papers, the page looks overwhelmingly busy and cluttered, so I add a light layer of clear gesso and let it dry. From there, I can add a tiny bit of color to some unbleached titanium acrylic paint, which I chose in this case. It looks very boring and lifeless though, so I want a little color added to it, and then thin it a bit with water so that it isn't so opaque that it completely erases the layer below. I want to calm the whole thing down while still leaving a hint of what's below, and that'll create some depth and interest. I'm purposely letting some underlying areas remain while other ones I'm covering up. And in the process, I'm blocking things out with a variety of edges. Some of them will be straight, others soft or gently faded out. And I'm going to scrape some of the paint on with a credit card edge, drag some of it across areas as well. I try to vary the shapes and sizes of what I leave visible as I go. You may have noticed that I kept a sheet of wax paper under each page while I was initially gluing things down, and I occasionally lifted my page before the glue could set and dry on the wax paper. I'm trying to protect the pages underneath from what I'm doing here, and I don't want pages sticking together. I probably should have left those wax papers in place as I continue to spread paint, and probably will use more glue. I'll use some of the Caran d'Ache crayons to add some marks and colors, but because they're water soluble, I'm going to be covering them with a touch of clear gesso to seal them and make them permanent. Even the moisture of the gesso, though, activates them so that they smear a little bit. The less I go over them, the better, if I want them to stay put. To make them drip, I just add water. Once I've faded out some of the background and added a little color, I can start building things back up with more papers and images. I'm going to be using a copy of Michelangelo's painting called Creation from a bulletin at church as my focal point, and I'm assuming at this point that I won't be covering it up. I did some scribble lines just for fun in pencil, and now I'm going to add some contrast using some stenciled letters and numbers and a stamped bicycle tire, using black for all of those. I'll outline my focal point and a few other areas with a soft water-based pencil that I can blend and smear a little to create a shadow. I also snuck in a couple of stickers with tiny black numbers on them. Really, anything goes. It's fun just to throw anything and everything into mixed media. Next, using watered down white gesso, I'll soften some of these areas again so they don't stand out as much and create some of the soft, softening, pushing back areas while others are more of a chiseled look. And with just a touch of olive green added to the white gesso straight from the tube, I'll push back some of the papers with a little bit of color as well. I really went to town neutralizing everything, and it's kind of got a green tinge to it. So now I'm going to build it back up a little with a deeper green square, a rusty squiggle, and some white gesso shapes. With that same pencil I used last time, I'll outline some of the texture created by the edges of some of those papers that have now been hidden underneath. The edge of a credit card or a hotel key card is great for creating lines or dragging over rough spots to highlight the texture of underlying items with gesso or paint. In some areas, I lay down color and then I dab it off to soften it or to give it more texture. Bubble wrap makes a great stamp for adding a pattern. I painted a piece of it with deeper tones of green watercolor, but then dabbed some of it off to soften it. I sprinkled some white acrylic paint with a paintbrush to give the whole thing more life. The smaller the paintbrush, the smaller the splatters. I'm also working to add a little more of the contrasting colors in as well. The pages I'm working on are part of a journal that I created after a lettering class by an artist, Lori Doctor. She had us create squares of writings using different lettering styles, colors, and writing implements. My letters are written with things like a shell, a stick, a pencil. I used a calligraphy pen and various inks and paints. And then she had us use a straight edge of a ruler to tear the larger sheet of paper in half over and over until it got to be this size. Then we sewed sections of pages together before connecting them. The finished journal has all my original writings and blank pages from the back side of those writings, which I'll continue to create on. As I continue on this entry, I smudged some pencil along the edges of the papers for a light shadow border. And to wrap it up, I wrote out the words from 2 John 1:3, which say, "Grace, mercy, and peace from God the Father and from Jesus Christ the Father's Son will be with us in truth and love." In the end, all those textures underneath made my writing a little bumpy, so I decided to soften it with a thin layer of white so they actually blend in. The process of creating this page took days of layering and drawing and layering and covering up, but it was so fun to come back to when I had time to enjoy it. I hope it was helpful and inspires you in some way to find some time to relax and create. God bless you. I hope you have a wonderful time doing what it is that makes you delight in the Word of God.